I know, and I didn't realize. I just learned, Ron, that you were a late writer like me, right? Like
Yeah.
it didn't happen
Well,
right away. Yeah.
no, it was very slow going for a long time, but I don't regret that.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
either.
I
I
think
don't either.
when I finally published, it was something that was, fully realized, and I wouldn't have wanted my early work to, it just wasn't that good. Mine wasn't. Yeah.
I agree. I feel the same way. And I think about how much I struggled earlier on. Like, why am I not getting published? And now I know it's like,
Yeah.
because I wasn't any good.
Yeah. Me too.
And it's like, I was a grown up when I got published. So that's a good thing to be. Doesn't mean you don't have to do that early work, though. Doesn't mean you still got to do it.
All right, I know some people are still entering, and some people have to kind of duck in and duck out early, and that's perfectly fine. But I just wanted to thank those who are here, or if you're viewing the video retrospectively, for joining us for the hour where we have two amazing writers coming to us across the nation for the hour. We have Ron Rash and Bonnie Jo Campbell, who I'll be introducing in just a moment. But I first want to just kind of give a quick rundown of the hour so you know what to expect. We'll start with introductions. We'll have a small conversation with our visiting writers. They'll each read for about 10 minutes from their work, and then we'll end with an audience Q&A. So this is where you guys come in. We have an active chat, which I encourage you guys to use. We've had some interesting comments in the last few readings. You can drop a question in there and we'll get to it throughout the hour, or you can, of course, make comments about what the writers are saying, or a particular line that you find wonderful, or just offer your 2 cents, and we can kind of have a side conversation as we're listening to their words of wisdom. Or if you're the shy type, you can also drop a question into the Q&A Dropbox, which is located on your screen. And we'll be happy to get to that by the end of the hour. So you can ask anything about their work as they are speaking to us, but you can also ask broader questions about the writing life or process or struggles that you have as a writer, and they'd be happy to chat with you about it. A couple people I want to thank is Jim Stick, who is the Dean of Liberal Arts, who has been supporting our festival for over 2 decades now. And we've had a great year so far of online and face-to-face readings. And in fact, 2 weeks from now, we'll have our last reading of the semester, in which we'll have Tracy Brimhall, the poet from Kansas State, will be joining us, as well as Chigozie Obioma, who's from the University of Nebraska. So if you're in the area, please come and join us. Or if nothing else, maybe check out our website, which I'm actually putting into the chat, which has all the dates and information. We also want to thank Beaverdale Books, who is our local independent bookstore, who has purchased or helped us purchase books from both Ron and Bonnie Jo, and they're available for free. So if you're watching this in the recording or are live, just go ahead and email me, and I'll drop my email address into the chat in just a moment, and give me a mailing address. And whether you're local or around the world, we'd be happy to send you free copies of any of their books while supplies last. So first come, first serve on that. All right, without any further ado, I want to introduce our 2 writers. We'll begin with Ron Rash, who is the author of the 2009 PEN/Faulkner finalist and New York Times bestseller Serena, which was made into a major motion picture, and Above the Waterfall, in addition to 4 prize-winning novels, including The Cove, One Foot in Eden, Saints at the River, and The World Made Straight, which I believe was also made into a film. He's the author of 4 collections of poems and 6 collections of stories, among them Burning Bright, which won the 2010 Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award, and Chemistry and Other Stories, which was a finalist for the 2007 PEN/Faulkner Award. Twice the recipient of the O. Henry Prize, as well as featured in Best American Short Stories multiple times. He teaches at Western Carolina University, and we have 3 of his titles, including his latest, which was In the Valley, collection of short stories. He is joined by Bonnie Jo Campbell, who is the author of the novels Once Upon a River, a national bestseller, and Q Road. Her critically acclaimed short fiction collections include American Salvage, which was a finalist for both the National Book Award and the National Book Critics Circle Award, Women and Other Animals, which won the AW Prize for short fiction, and Mothers Tell Your Daughters, which was published in 2015, and we also have available. Her story, The Smallest Man in the World, was awarded the Pushcart Prize, and her story, The Inventors 1972, was awarded the 2009 Eudora Welty Prize from Southern Review, and she's a 2011 Guggenheim Fellow. So I just want to thank you guys for joining us from across the country and spending the hour with us.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll begin with a question that we were talking about in my, I was just having a conversation with a student 2 minutes ago out in the hall, and we were talking about both of your voices, and we were thinking about how the landscape tends to influence both your voices. Kind of like one of the reasons we paired you together is that you kind of write from a similar place. Maybe you can each talk to us a little bit about setting, which is seen as maybe background, and how you make it more of a foreground in your work. Ron, would you like to start us off maybe talking about setting and how it works?
Well, it's crucial for me. And I want the reader to have as strong a sense of the place as possible in my work. But I'm even more interested in how a landscape affects the psychology of the characters and of real people.
Yeah.
And I'll be interested in hearing Bonnie Jo on this, but I really, even in a couple of my books, particularly The Cove, landscape and destiny become inextricable. But yeah, you know, it's to me, it's just a big part of what I love about writing, whether it's Mo Yan writing about China, you know, rural China, or Richard Price writing about New York City. Just a sense of being there, almost as if you visited it, even if you know, get through the books.
Yeah, Bonnie Jo, do you have similar ideas about how?
Yeah, I know, it's critical. I mean, there's nothing more critical for me. And I have to say that I sometimes, when I'm writing, often, my main character will actually be an actual embodiment of the landscape, if I could say that. Like when I was writing Once Upon a River, you know, I had to puzzle out. I always have an easy time with all my side characters, and then my main character is always really hard. And then so I figured out that actually she was the physical embodiment of the river. And so anytime I had to figure out what this character was going to do or how she was going to respond, I would figure out, well, how does the river respond, you know, to obstacles, and how does, you know, what would the river be like if it were a person? And I mean, I think you can think of that as like a fairy tale kind of thing. You know, we're used to that in fairy tales, that, you know, pieces of the landscape actually can be embodied. And I think I actually do that. And in Q Road, the gal was pretty much the land. She was this land rising up from the river. And, you know, I would say that the other thing is that I generally write about one place, and it is Southwest Michigan. And in some ways, I've often felt kind of dumb about it, because I'm like, well, why am I, you know, this is a limiting factor for me. You know, I've worried that. But I actually think that if you are really familiar with the characteristics of the landscape you are writing about, you can use that landscape to make do a whole bunch of the work for you. Like if you know the landscape you're working in, you can look around and find the tree that you need, or find the object if you know that landscape like the back of your hand, you can find in that landscape the physical thing that you need to make your story work in that moment, you know, or to make your scene work.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I would even add a little bit more to that. To me, I made this analogy before. It's almost like you're a farmer digging for water. You just keep going deeper and deeper into this place, and you're going to hit the universal. Eudora Welty says, one place comprehended makes us understand all other places better. And when people, you know, sometimes, I'm sure this happens with Bonnie Jo, sometimes people will use the term regional writer, and in a way it implies limitations, but I would have viewed just the opposite. And I would argue the most regional book of all is probably Joyce's Ulysses, because it's all in one place in 24 hours, and it's about this one small section of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
But it's about everything.
Yeah.
no, I love that advice from both you guys, and thinking about it's almost like a literal map that kind of guides you as a writer through the story, which I think is really helpful advice. Thinking about process and like getting through the story. I mean, it's interesting that you guys are probably more known for your prose, but you each have published poems. And I was wondering how you approach genres differently, whether it be poetry or a novel or a short story. And maybe even, I don't know, how does poetry maybe influence your fiction, or your fiction influence your poetry? Or are they completely different, maybe? And Bonnie Jo, do you have some thoughts about maybe novels versus short stories?
Yeah, originally I used to have, I think it might even still be on my website if I have the old website, part of the website somewhere. I was like, I never write poetry. And I don't know why I said that, because now it's critical to my life to write poetry. I don't care if I ever publish the poetry, but it's critical for me to wake up in the morning and write poetry. It's just playing around with words, and it's unlike, I mean, fiction. The problem with fiction, I mean, there's a lot of problems with fiction, is that you got to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and I had a lot of those, and for about 15 years I was writing, and I was just like had this, these things I had saved up my whole life to write. And I could find middles and beginnings and endings. And then all of a sudden I realized there's all this other stuff that I got to write, and it doesn't fit into that. But I mean, poetry comes out of some, urge or something. It's almost like a sexual urge or something, that it's just like, I just have to do this thing. And so that to me is really fun after working so hard on fiction. I mean, there's an aspect of fiction that we're like, we can even convince ourselves we're not artists. We're craftspeople. We have our bricks and we're building a wall and we're building a house or whatever. And then so like, it's good to be reminded with poetry that like, actually it's this sort of magical thing too. It's this magical thing to fit together. And, in addition to that, my first love was it was essays, was writing personal essays. And I think in some ways that's the most American thing. It's the most American form in some way. I know when I'm teaching, it's the thing my students are most comfortable with, these personal essays. Maybe it's because we're all full of ourselves nowadays, and we just are bursting to share what we have. And the essay is a nice way to do that. So I like to write all three. And sometimes I've written all three about the same subject. And I enjoy seeing those differences.
Yeah, we were talking about before the reading, where it's like you're writing an essay about one of the characters in your short story, and it probably helps to kind of like inform the art, which I love. Ron, do you have some?
Well, no, because what it turns out, it's totally different. It's completely different, it turns out.
Ron, do you have some thoughts about different genre and cross genre?
Yeah, I published 5 books of poetry. So and in my early part of particularly my late 20s, early 30s, I was primarily writing poetry and some short stories. I came to the novel late, but the novels I love the most are the ones that I can read them purely for the language. And that's what I aim for in mine. I'm doing some final edits on a new novel. And for me, as I get into these final few read throughs, it's all about sound. It's about which syllables to stress, which rhythm. I really want the language to be as vivid and to use whatever I've learned from poetry in it. And I even, I had some fun in my last book. I had a story, a novella, and the characters, I had these rustics, mountain characters who speak in a very, interesting dialect, Appalachian dialect. But I thought I'm going to have some fun in this book, and I had them speak in iambic pentameter. And, I don't think the reader would, so a lot of times the reader doesn't catch that. The ear does, their ear does. But yeah, so I just love bringing as much as I've learned from poetry into the prose.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're giving kind of these rustic working class lumberjacks, basically, this kind of Shakespearean theatric kind of quality of the poetry, the lyricism of it. That's awesome.
Well, I'm not so sure that's out of line, though. I think often people are speaking, and I mean, it's a very,
Oh, yeah,
know,
it's the
I
most natural rhythm. Yeah, yeah. English, yeah. You're right.
The heartbeat, right? I love that. Well, without further ado, so we don't run out of time, I could talk to you guys forever, and we will kind of continue this conversation in just a moment, but maybe we can hear a little bit of your work for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes a piece. Ron, do you want to begin?
I can, yeah. Yeah, this is a story. Where I live, there are a lot of whitewater rivers, and unfortunately, sometimes people don't realize how dangerous they are. And this is about a situation like that. It's called Something Rich and Strange. She follows the river's edge downstream, leaving behind her parents and younger brother who still eat their picnic lunch. It is Easter break, and her father's taken time off from his job. They have followed the Appalachian Mountains south, stopping first in Gatlinburg, then the Smokies, and finally this river. She finds a place above the falls where the water looks shallow and slow. The river is a boundary between Georgia and South Carolina, and she wants to wade into the middle and place 1 foot in Georgia and 1 in South Carolina so she can tell her friends back in Nebraska she has been in 2 states at the same time. She kicks off her sandals and enters. The water so much colder than she imagined, quickly deeper, up to her kneecaps, the current surging under the smooth surface. She shivers. On the far shore, a granite cliff casts this section of river into shadow. She glances back to where her parents and brother sit on the blanket. It is warmer there, the sun full upon them. She thinks about going back, but is almost halfway now. She takes a step and the water rises higher on her knees. 4 more steps, she tells herself. Just 4 more and I'll turn back. She takes another step and the bottom is no longer there, and she's being shoved downstream, and she does not panic because she has passed all her Red Cross courses. The water shallows and her face breaks the surface and she breathes deep. She tries to turn her body so she won't hit her head on a rock. And for the first time, she's afraid, and she's suddenly back underwater and hears the rush of water against her ears. She tries to hold her breath, but her knee smashes against a boulder and she gasps in pain and water pours into her mouth. Then for a few moments, the water pools and slows. She rises, coughing up water, gasping air, her feet dragging the bottom like an anchor, trying to snag waterlogged wood or rock jut. And as the current quickens again, she sees her family running along the shore, and she knows they're shouting her name, though she cannot hear them. And as the current turns her, she hears the falls and knows there's nothing that will keep her from it. As the current quickens and another rock smashes against her knee, but she hardly feels it as she snatched another breath, and she feels the river fall, and she falls with it as water whitens around her, and she falls deep into the whiteness. And as she raises her head, it scrapes against a rock ceiling, and the water holds her there. And she tells herself, don't breathe, but the need rises inside her, beginning in the upper stomach, then up through her chest and throat. And as that need reaches her mouth and nose open, and the lungs explode in pain. And then the pain is gone as bright colors shatter around her like glass shards. She remembers her 6th grade science class, the gurgled aquarium at the back of the room, the smell of chalk dust that morning. The teacher held a prism out the window so it might fill with color. She has a final beautiful thought, that she is now inside the prism and knows something even the teacher does not know, that the prism's colors are voices that swirl around her head like a crown. And at that moment, her arms and legs she did not even know were flailing cease, She becomes part of the river. The search and rescue squad and the sheriff arrived at the falls late that afternoon. Two of the squad members were brothers, one in his early 20s, the other 30. They had a carpentry business, building patios and decks for lawyers and doctors from Greenville and Columbia who owned second homes in the mountains. The third man, the diver, was in his early 40s and taught biology at the county high school. The sheriff looked at his watch and figured they had 2 hours at most before the gorge darkened. Even so, the diver did not hurry to put on his wetsuit and air tanks. He smoked a cigarette between puffs, talked to the sheriff about the high school baseball team. They had worked together and knew death punched no time clock. When the diver was ready, a length of nylon rope was clasped tight under his arms. The older, stronger brother held the other end. The diver waded into the river, the rope trailing behind him like a leash. He dipped his mask in the water, put it on, leaned forward. 3 men on shore watched as the black fins propelled the diver into the hydraulic, ceaseless blizzard of whitewater. The men on the bank sat on rocks and waited. With his free hand, the older brother pointed upstream to a bend where he caught a 5-pound rainbow trout last fall. Sheriff asked what he'd used for bait, but didn't hear the answer because the mask bobbed up in the headwaters foam. Brother tightened the slack and pulled, but nothing gave until the others grabbed hold as well. They pulled the diver into the shallows and helped him onto shore. Between watery coughs, he told them he had found her in the undercut behind the hydraulics. She had been upright, her head and back and legs pressed against a rock slab. Only her hair moved, its long strands streaming upward. As the diver drifted closely, he saw that her eyes were open. Their faces were inches apart when he slipped an arm around her waist. Then the hydraulic ripped free the mask and mouthpiece, grabbed the dive light, spiraling it toward the darkness. The diver told the men kneeling beside him that the girl's blue eyes had life in them. He could feel her heart beating against his chest and hear her whispering. Before or after your mask was torn off, the sheriff asked. The diver did not know, but swore he'd never enter the river again. The younger brother scoffed while the older spoke of narcosis, though the pool was no more than 20 feet deep. But the sheriff did not dismiss what the diver said. He too had seen strange and inexplicable things involving the dead, but had never mentioned them to others and did not choose to now. We'll find another way, he said, but that river has to lower some before I allow anyone else in there. The diver had trouble sleeping afterward. Every night when he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's wide blue eyes, the flowing golden hair. His wife slept beside him, her body curled into his chest. They had no children, and now he was glad for that. He had seen a picture of the parents in the local paper. They'd been on the shore within 30 feet of the undercut that held their daughter, the expressions on their faces beyond grief. On the third night, the diver fell into a deeper sleep and the girl came with him. They were in the undercut again, but now the river was tepid and he could breathe. As he embraced her, she whispered that this world was better than the one above, and she would never have, and should never have been afraid. He emerged in his wife's embrace. It's just a bad dream, she kept saying until he quit gasping. His wife closed her eyes and was quickly asleep, but he could not, so went into the kitchen and graded lab tests until dawn. The girl remained in the river. Volunteers cast grappling hooks from the banks and worked them like lures through the pool, or stood in the shallows or on rocks and jabbed with long metal poles. Some of the old timers suggested dynamite, but the girl's parents would not hear of it. Sheriff said what they needed was a week without rain. The diver slept little the next few nights. In class, he placed the students in small groups and had them discuss assigned chapters among themselves. He knew they talked about the prom instead of pupae, but he didn't care. On the third afternoon, He skipped the teacher's meeting and sat alone in the classroom. The school, emptied of students, was quiet. The only sound, the gurgle of the aquarium. He would never speak to anyone, not even his wife, about what happened in the classroom stillness. But that evening, he told the sheriff he'd die for the girl again. Days passed. Rain came, long rains that made every folded ridge land a tributary and merged earth and water into a deep orange-yellow rush. Banks disappeared as the river reached out and dragged them under. But that was only surface. In the undercut, all remained quiet and still. The girl's transformation unrushed, gentle. Crayfish and minnows, unknitted flesh from bone, attentive to loose threads. Then the rain stopped and the river ran clear again. Boulders vanished for weeks, reappeared. Sandbars and stick jams regathered in new configurations. The water warmed and caddisflies broke through the river skin to make their brief flights before falling back into their element. The sheriff called the diver and told him the river was low enough to try again. The next day, they walked the half-mile down the path to the falls. There were 5 of them this time, the sheriff, his deputy, the 2 brothers, and the diver. The sheriff insisted on 2 ropes, making sure they stayed taut. The water was clearer than last time and offered less resistance. The diver entered the abeyance as though parting a curtain. The river suddenly muted. She was less of what she had been. The blue rubbed from her eyes, flesh freed from the chandelier bone. He touched what once had been a hand. The river whispered to him that it would not be long now. When he returned to shore, he told him the body was gone, not even a scrap of clothing or bone. He told him the last hard rain must have swept her downstream. The younger brother said the diver should go back and search the left and right sides of the falls. He argued the body could still be there. The deputy suggested they lower an underwater camera into the pool. Sheriff shook his head and said to let her be. The men walked up the trail, back toward their vehicles, their lives. The midday sun leaned close and dazzling. Dogwoods bloomed small white stars. The diver knew in the coming days the petals would find their way into the river, drifting on the sandbars and gilding the backs of pools. And the diver knew some would drift through the rapids and over the falls into the hydraulic. They would furl amid the last bones, and like the last bones, they would finally slip free.
So much for reading that piece to us. I was curious about, it's such a short piece, it's only like 6 pages long, and yet it has so much going on in it, in that we follow multiple points of view, and we have that wonderful passage where we see her drowning. There's a question in the Q&A that might be appropriate here, and this can go for both of you guys actually, before we hear Bonnie read. It says, Ron, you have mentioned that images are a creative springboard for your novels, or I'm sure your short stories too. And are your poems also inspired by specific images? So I guess thinking in a broader way, like what's an image, or like how do you generate, what's the first spark of a piece for you, and how you know it's gonna.
Well, I think for me, I mean, every writer does it, I think some way differently, but for me, it all starts with the image. Even my novels, that story actually, and I actually ended up writing a kind of novel about this. I just saw a child's face in water, and her hair was streaming, and that's what I had, and everything started there. But yeah, for whatever reason, it's the image that very often triggers it. With poetry, I think I come to the words quicker. I mean, I start to hear the rhythm of the poem right away. Yeah, you know, yeah, I start with the image, and I kind of trust that image. And sometimes when I work this way through novels, it's kind of scary because I don't plot or outline. I've got friends who do, and that works well for them. But You know, usually about a year in with a novel, I'll just feel like I've lost it completely. I don't know where it's going. And I just kind of have to trust that image that, you know, why that image is lodged in my head, there's more there, and I've just got to wait it out. Bonnie Joe, what about you? I'm interested in this.
I think you're muted, Bonnie. Bonnie, I think you're muted. It's all right. There you go.
No, I love hearing you say that because I'm the complete opposite. I think my whole life is in search of the image. I'm trying to get to the image. I don't have it. And in fact, I even discovered I actually have a kind of a mental processing problem that I don't create images. And I think that's why I write, in order to like do all this work to get to the
Oh, wow.
image. So I'm like the anti-poet.
Yeah.
I'm like the anti-poet, and it's like I'm desperate for the images. And you know, so I love hearing that you're actually able. And so I'm working from the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And but I mean, that story is such a marvel. That story is such a marvel. I love that story. And I love how that point of view thing, that it's her story. So, you know, when I first read that story before now, I was like, never occurred to me you were going to kill her, because it was like, this is her story. And you know what, though? It is her story, because you follow her body disintegrating right to the end. I mean, this is her. And I love how, like, the sheriff is the hero in that story. You know, somehow that sheriff who just has a couple lines is the hero of that story, because he's the one who understands that, in the first part, that he understands that the dead speak to you, and then he knows to let her be. So that story is just a marvel. And you know, sometimes I want to compare, you know, I compare Ron to Flannery O'Connor, you know, sometimes when I'm reading it, but man, she's so brutal. She's so brutal. And you're actually a gentle soul. You know, you're a soul. You're not confident that God's going to sort everything out. You know, as the author, that's part of your job too, to do a little bit of the sorting.
Oh, well, I've got something. I don't know if y'all can see this. Probably not. But I've got a picture of Flannery O'Connor glaring at me when I write.
She's mean.
Yeah,
And
she
she's
was.
mean. Although I was thinking of Flannery when you burned that barn down in that story, in that same book. I was like, I knew from the beginning of that story, I saw that lit joint, and I was like, damn it, they're going to burn that barn down. And I was like, damn you, that's Flannery O'Connor. They're going to burn that barn down. But yeah, I just love this story. I think it's a marvel, this story that you just read. And it's so compassionate, and it's so, how can it be so life affirming, even though it's about a rotting carcass, you know?
Yeah, because the living are so generous. And yeah, I agree with you, Bonnie. That's awesome. Do you want to read something from your work, please?
Well, I'll probably get us off on some other track here. I could talk more about Ron's, but we'll get together again, Ron, and talk more about this. So I decided I'm going to read 2 poems, and then the solution to Brian's problem. So this will be totally different. So I'm not going to compete with one of those. That is that's only a 6-page story. It has so much in it for a 6-page story. This is a very short poem called Drink Me. So drink me. I'm small potatoes, not vodka. My body is a body of work. As a woman, I've been terrorized by God and spirits. My mother brewed a strong liquor from whatever juice was on hand, grapes, pears. She even opened her veins. On her deathbed, she drank what remained. She left none of her recipes, just bottles of purple stuff that said, wine or vinegar, you decide, girl. These are new poems. I probably shouldn't read new poems, but I'm doing it anyway. This is called For My Mausoleum, a Mycelium. You guys know what a mycelium is, right? Yeah. It's the mushroom body. This, for my mausoleum, a mycelium. This is how I eat mushrooms. First, I wake from a dream of a forest floor, then throw down my gown before a sporophore, break free the fruiting body. In my kitchen, I don't have a microscope, so I pray, get my affairs in order, clean the counter, prepare butter, am kinder than usual to my husband. He will marry again, though he says he won't. He points out oysters, morels, chanterelles, once a dog phallus stinkhorn. Spiders and mice, envious, wait for me to grow small. All night the hungry threads thread through me, bewildering, beguiling my wilderness body, dreaming me fruitful. Everybody loves mushrooms. Okay, so I'm going to read this story, The Solutions to Brian's Problem. And this is a little bit different from the version that's in the book. And I started thinking about stories, how we always just have one version of a story. And, you know, think about Monet. He got to paint that haystack over and over again, you know? And it's weird, like, why don't we have something like that in writing? We don't get that. You know, we kind of, people, once they get our story, they don't want to read it again, you know, or maybe once, but. Okay, the solutions to Brian's problem. Solution number one. Connie said she was going out to the store to buy formula and diapers. While she's gone, load up the truck with the surround sound home entertainment system and your excellent collection of power tools. Put the baby girl in the car seat and drive away from this home you built with your own hands. Expect that after you leave, she will break all the windows in this living room, including the big picture window, as well as the big mirror over the fireplace, which you've already replaced twice. The furnace will run and run. Solution number two. Wait until Connie comes back from the store, distract her with the baby, and then cut her meth with Drano so that when she shoots it up, she dies. Solution number three. Put the baby to bed in her crib and sit on the living room couch until Connie comes home. Before she has a chance to lie about where she's been, grab her hair and knock her head hard into the fireplace that you built from granite blocks that came from the old chimney of the house your great-grandfather built when your family first came to this country from Finland. Don't look at the wedding photos on the mantle. Don't let the blood stop you from hitting her one final time to make sure you have cracked her skull. Put her meth and her bag of syringes and blood-smeared needles in her hand so the cops find them when they arrive. Solution number four. Just go. Head south where it's warm. Contact the union about getting a job with another local. Pretend not to have a wife and baby. When put to the test, Connie might well rise to the occasion of motherhood. Resist taking any photographs along with you, especially the photographs of your baby at every age. Wipe your mind clear of memories, especially the memory of your wife first telling you she was pregnant and how that pregnancy and her promise to stay clean made everything seem possible. The two of you kept holding hands that night. You couldn't stop reaching for each other, even in your sleep. She lost that baby, and the next one. And although you suspected the reason, you kept on trying. Solution number 5, blow your own head off with the 12 gauge you keep behind the seat of your truck. Load the shotgun with shells, put the butt against the floor, rest your chin on the barrel and pull the trigger. Let your wife find your bloody corpse in the living room. Let her scrape your brain off the walls. Maybe that will shock her into straightening up her act. Let her figure out how to pay the mortgage and the power bill. Solution 6, call a helpline. Talk to a counselor. Explain that last week your wife stabbed you in the chest while you were sleeping, and she punches you too, giving you black eyes that you have to explain to the guys at work. Explain to the counselor that you're in danger of losing your job, your house, your baby. Tell her Connie has sold your mountain bike and some of your excellent power tools already. Try to be patient when the counselor seems awkward in her responses, when she inadvertently expresses surprise at the nature of your distress, especially when you admit that Connie is only 5'1". Expect the counselor to be even less supportive when you say, hell yes, you hit her back. Then realize that the counselor probably has caller ID. Hope that the counselor doesn't call social services because a baby girl needs her mama. Assure the counselor that Connie is a good mama. She's good with the baby. The baby is in no danger. Solution number 7, make dinner for yourself and your wife with a hamburger in the fridge. Sloppy Joes maybe, or goulash with the stewed tomatoes your mother canned. Your mother, who like the rest of your family, thinks your wife is just moody. You haven't told him the truth because it's too much to explain. And it's too much to explain that, yes, you knew she had this history when you married her, but you thought that you could kick it together. You thought that love could mend all broken things. Wasn't that the whole business of love? Mix up some bottles of formula for later tonight when you will be sitting in the living room, feeding the baby, watching the door of the bathroom, behind which your wife will be searching for a place in her vein that has not hardened or collapsed. When she finally comes out, brush her hair back from her face and try to get her to eat something.
That's, you've done something I've never been able to do, and that's use second person. But it just struck me as you were doing that it really,
It's not second person.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
just, I mean, you know what I mean? Just, that
Yeah.
you're, in a sense, you're putting that character.
Ostensibly it is, yeah.
Yeah. But just, yeah, but by doing that, I think you make the reader or allow the reader to really get closer. I mean, because it's almost as if you're putting the reader into that situation. So yeah, that's what struck me.
Which is hard because, you know, you wonder, does the reader want to be put into that
Yeah,
situation, you know? So,
Yeah.
you know, I wanted to tell that story. I'll say the way that I tell it, what comes to me with a story, the first thing that comes is a character that I'm interested in a really difficult situation. That's how I start a story, a character in a tough situation. So I knew I wanted to write about this character in this tough situation, but I couldn't figure out how to do it without turning it into pure melodrama, you know, because it's a melodramatic story. I mean, it's as bad as tying a girl tied to a railroad tracks, you know, and waiting for Snidely Whiplash to rescue her. But and it turned out that somehow doing this when I finally tripped onto this and having this list, then I was able to tell the story.
That's amazing. I teach that story every semester, like we're talking about. And you were mentioning how despite the melodrama or the tragedy, there's also a certain amount of humor involved in it. And it's true, when we read this out loud in my class, there's always like, I don't know if it's nervous laughter or shock. But there is it gets so extreme, his desperation, that it's almost like you turn the melodrama into like a humorous moment, I think.
Well, and I think about this and I wonder if I'm sure Ron's going to say the same thing, is that, when you're in these real situations with, we both write about people who don't have real safety nets. Our characters don't really have safety nets. They're really kind of at the edge all the time. And when things get really bad, people laugh a lot. In real life, the worst situations, already, like, our people are seeing them as stories that are going to be told because the situation is so rough. And, in my family, like, you wouldn't tell a story if it didn't have some kind of humor in it. You just wouldn't tell it. And somehow that humor has to be an integral part.
Yeah, and I think that also, because we do have those moments, for me, when, early on with talking to the counselor, but it made the impact, I think, all the more intense, because you kind of moved us in certain ways, and then, it works. And what I love about humor is that, we can fake a lot of stuff, but humor either works or it doesn't. And, there's a kind of purity in humor in literature. You can't fake it. It has to be either funny or it isn't. And but those there were moments in there where and it's that very dark kind of humor too in those dark situations.
Yeah, maybe this will lead to like a kind of a follow-up, is that both of you guys write about violence and drug abuse or sexual assaults or dead bodies floating in rivers. So, but we were curious in my class about, like, how do you write about these dark subjects? One is maybe humor, but then how do you write about these extreme things? And are there other kind of techniques you're like, okay, how do I not make this exploitive or melodramatic or a soap opera? Like, what are some tactics that you use when you write about extreme things to kind of help, besides humor, maybe?
Well, I think Bonnie Jo showed one way, where you have that kind of sense of, the humor kind of breaks it up a little bit. But I think, and I think I will not speak for Bonnie Jo, but I suspect she agrees with me. We're not trying to titillate with the violence at all. I think if I'm doing that, I failed. But I do think, for one, I'm reflecting the reality of the rural world right now in the United States because of the drugs, but also I think it's the extreme situations where characters reveal themselves, as in real life. When everything's going well, we can keep the mask on, but it's in those moments, sometimes of life and death, sometimes of tragedy, that characters revealed. And I think so much of literature is about those moments when the mask falls away.
Yeah. Bonnie Jo, do you have some other?
Yeah, I know, and the challenge is, like I was mentioning, the other ways of writing the story, it felt melodramatic. And I think, what melodrama is unearned sympathy. Like, we're trying to claim some sympathy and we haven't really done the work to earn it, to justify it. And so I think just as long as those extreme situations, as long as they're true, as long as they're I have some stories that are very close to real life that I've actually been worried that, I need to share this with the person before I even have, publish this story, And, that's always a nerve-wracking situation. I just want to make sure your students know, always write the story, always write it. But maybe if it's time to publish it, if it does infringe on somebody, that's the time to think about it. Probably you'll change it so much it doesn't infringe on anybody, probably, by the time you make it a good story. But the response I've gotten in those situations are that, no, I got it right. I got that feeling right. And so I do think if we're really honest in telling the story, if we dig deeper, to use Ron's image of digging deeper into what is actually there to make sure we've gotten to the reason we want to use that violence, then we're okay. If we need that violence to make our point, to make the story work, then you wouldn't be justified in leaving it out,
For your story, Bonnie, I think that's the ending that really maybe helps as well, because you have all these extreme kind of violent scenarios, and then the ending is probably the most generous and normalized moment of the story that really it's almost unexpected in its normalness, which I think really helps to earn that violence. I love it. We have some questions from the audience here. So without further ado, one, actually, you just answered this, Bonnie, so we can skip that one. We have another one that's for both of you. When either of you read, do you visualize the setting? As you said earlier, it's a vital part towards any story. And what types of settings do you enjoy writing most? Those familiar to you or those you've never seen? So maybe a follow-up to the setting question. Bonnie, do you want to maybe start us off with?
Yeah, I couldn't write a scene. I couldn't write a scene if I didn't know the setting. I couldn't even write it. I wouldn't even know who the people were if I didn't know the setting. I mean, it seems crazy, but maybe I should try it sometime, to put, I guess I could put an interior. I could put characters in an interior, and yet I would see this. I would see that setting. I would see, I would see that. So yeah, I couldn't even write. I don't think I could write people if I didn't have setting.
Yeah, I want setting, and but there have been a couple of times when I've had to actually write about, well, in Serena, my novel Serena, I have a couple of important scenes in Boston, and actually, when I was working on the book, it worked out. I happened to be doing a reading in Boston, but I spent a day in the section where I would, and really try to get a sense of it, even though it's present day, still just being in that place, just having a sense of it, particularly the cobblestone, those things. But yeah, I'm pretty much. I've kept, I did one other story that said some of it set in France during World War II, but yeah, pretty much I'm just writing about the landscape I know. I will say that a writer I really admire, I find amazing, and I'll be interested in Bonnie Jo's, is Annie Proulx. She has the ability to write
How
about
does she do
4 or
that?
5 different landscapes, and so convincingly. I mean, you'd think she had to have lived there her whole life.
I think she did. I think she lived in most of those places.
Yeah,
I
she
think
did.
she
But I
did.
mean, just to be able to do 4 or 5
Mhm.
landscapes is incredible. I mean, with the way she does it, because she's so good at
I know
that.
you're convinced you're with somebody who was there, who's been there their whole life, and
Yeah.
their families have been there for generations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. We're based out of Iowa, and I think a lot of my students feel like, I'm not going to write about Iowa. It's boring. I'm going to write about LA. And it's like, you should write about your backyard a little bit, and you guys are kind of like speaking to that idea of writing about what you know. Let's see, we have another question here. It is for both of you. What point of view do you enjoy writing in the most? And maybe follow-up is like, how do you know which point of view to write from when it comes to a story or a novel? Ron, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would like to mention, I think a great Iowa writer, Tom Drury.
Yeah.
He writes about rural Iowa, and he's a wonderful writer.
Yeah.
So, you've got some writers there too, obviously, but he's one that a contemporary writer I think is really, really good. And he can be really funny. He can be a very comic writer. But yeah, going back to your question, I think which one I enjoy the most is that, well, novels are nightmare for me. I mean, every time I start, I just have a sinking feeling, and I feel like a mule. Because you're just going up and down these rows, and it just seems endless. And the novel I just finished took, usually every one of my other novels has taken 3 years. This one took 5.5 years, and it's not even that long a novel. And yeah, so what I love when you finish them, oh man, what a great feeling to finish a novel and feel like it's okay. But I think I enjoy probably poetry's the most fun, and short stories are kind of fun. Though I would say, and I want to get your point, your view on this, Bonnie. I think short stories are the hardest to do well of all three. For me, poetry and novels. I think a short story, you have to bring pretty much, the narrative sense of a fulfilled narrative of a novel, and yet, the kind of intensity of poetry in that every line has to work.
I agree. In the short story, yeah, you're doing, but although right now, just because of having finished this novel, I feel like novels are impossible. Like I'm convinced I'll never write another one, even as I'm plotting one in my head. I'm like, never, never. And this novel, speaking of point of view, this novel is omniscient. It's like, it's not what I wanted to do. And it's not just omniscient, like we use a lot of point of views. It's like from the point of view of God, basically. And it's like, that's what made it so hard. And it took me like 7 years to write it, because I think it took me about 3 years to get the nerve up to do what I was doing, to write. And basically to say not just how characters feel, but how things really are. And I don't even know if I'm old enough to do that yet. I'm 60. I don't know if I'm old enough, but my normal go-to point of view is third person limited. That's what I'm most comfortable with. I just want to tell the story the most traditional way, past tense, third person. And then unless something tells me to do it differently, like if I suddenly realize I've got an if I suddenly realize I have an unreliable third person narrator, suddenly I realize, oh, maybe that ought to be a first person. If I've got a real unreliable person telling the story. And so I start out in third person past tense, and then I'll if the story forces me to go somewhere else. And I am a slow writer. I worked on one short story one time, one short story from American Salvage I worked on for 24 years.
Wow.
I know, I don't give up. I've been married for like 36 years, 37 years this year. So I don't give up on a thing.
I'm kind of the same way, and I have stories that not that long, but I've had stories that probably 10 years where I just I didn't get them right. I knew something was wrong, and
and you just don't give up. That's the thing. You put it aside.
I don't know what it is about. I'm like that too, and
sometimes you're just like, you're not ready to write the story until 10 years go by or something like that. I love that.
Yeah, well, I had the story I was writing, it was about a drug addict and an alcoholic in love. And every time I wrote it, I'd share it with somebody and they'd be like, I don't want to read about these people, and I was like, obviously I haven't done my job, so I have to keep working on it. So, and I think I pulled it off, finally made it a story people wanted to read. But, isn't that funny that like, it isn't a real story until you've done all your work, the story you want to tell, kind of, you've worked on the language, but somehow until somebody wants to read it, which means until you know that somebody wants to read it in your heart, the story, it isn't finished somehow until it's a story that is ready to meet the public, I could say.
The one I did that took 10 years was there was a plane crash near where I live. And I live 15 miles from the Great Smoky Mountains, so it's very isolated. And a small plane, a Cessna, went down, and they didn't find it for like 6 years. And a bear hunter found it, and I knew there's a story here. And I kept thinking, the bear hunter's going to find it, or I just kept going, and finally I kept the clipping of the article on my bureau where I'd see it every day.
Next to Flannery.
And I just one morning I just thought, it's a child that's going to find this plane. And
that's great.
That child.
I love that story. I know that story. I love it.
Into the gorge, right?
I say no. It's what's that? Damn, I've forgotten the name.
I don't remember the title of it, but I don't remember the title. But I know that story. That's a gorgeous story. Yeah. That's a gorgeous story. And that kid finds that stuff and he brings it home and to his meth parents. Man, you do meth like nobody else. You got meth down. You're definitely no, I won't say you're no stranger to meth, but yes.
Well, yeah, well, anyway, moving on. Yeah, but I mean, the moment I realized, I've just got the wrong person finding the plane, and then, there's
Oh, that's great.
Awesome. Well, we have so many questions coming in, but we're running out of time. So maybe this one will be a good one to kind of finish on, is thinking about the future. And it's thinking about, we were talking about this before the reading, what are some publications that are on the horizon for you and what's coming out soon from you guys? Bonnie, would you like to start?
Oh, yeah, my novel, The Waters, with the snake on the cover. It was supposed to be called Donkey. That was my title all along, Donkey, because the girl's name's Donkey, which I thought was a cute title, but they didn't. They decided at the publisher they didn't like it, so it's called The Waters, and it's about women living in a swamp, and that's why I got to have another conversation with Ron about what it means. These are women living in a swamp, on a swamp island. So that's different than people living in the mountains, eh?
yeah.
So The Waters, and it's a novel out in October.
In October. Awesome.
Yeah.
And Ron?
Yeah, I've got a novel called The Caretaker coming out in September, and it's set in 1951, and I thought that would be an interesting time period because it was kind of the last time that almost all human interaction was face to face, at least in rural areas. It's kind of, in a way, almost a kind of view of what it was like before technology in some ways, where so much communication. But it was kind of an interesting moment for me because my grandmother's farm in the North Carolina mountains, I spent a lot of time there growing up, and I'd always wanted to write about it. So I actually kind of was able to write about that farm and the landscape and that place. I'd never done that for this specific farm. And it was kind of a wonderful kind of going back to it. So yeah, this is yes, it's called The Caretaker.
Awesome. And going back to the past, we have your previous works available. So once again, my email address is in the chat. If you want a copy of one of their titles, please email me and be happy to send it to you. But I also want to just thank you guys for spending the hour with us. We have a million questions. We could be here all day, but I'm sure you have writing to get to. All right.
Well, it's good to meet Bonnie Jo off the page, right?
Yes,
and it's just
definitely.
not on the page. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mark. Good. I enjoyed it very much.
Awesome. Thank you guys for showing up and sharing your insight with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. All right. Well done.